I think that the big issue with alien visitation is that it would be very disruptive. Now, if the aliens wanted to attack us and destroy us, that they could easily do that, because if they have the technology to get here, then destroying the planet is just a trivial thing. They could just steer an asteroid into the planet and boom, everyone's dead. So it's not even really worth worrying about something like that, because there's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah.
But if we simply discover alien visitors and they are friendly, what's going to happen is that it's going to be very disruptive to things like science and technology and industry and the military and to the political scene.
Thank you
All
so
right?
much for
Yeah.
taking the time.
No, you're
Where are you
welcome.
at, by the way, Mick? Where are you at?
Sacramento, Northern
Sacramento.
California. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. How long
It's
have you
not
been
dark
out
here. I
there?
just closed the blinds.
I got mine closed too. Trust me, I'm in Texas,
Yeah,
bright
it's
sun.
yeah. I've been here. Well, Sacramento. I've been here about 7 years now. I used to be in LA before that when I was back in the video game industry. Down in Santa Monica and Venice.
Right
But
on.
yeah, so I've been up here. It's a lovely little area.
And you originally, just based off your accent, and I also work with people from the UK. How long have you, like, when did you move?
I moved to America in '94, I believe.
Oh,
So
wow.
quite a long
Okay.
time ago.
Yeah. So you're an American now, right? Do you hold dual
Yeah,
citizenship?
I do. Yes, I have American citizenship, and people from the UK tell me that I've got a bit of an American accent,
That's
but
that's hilarious.
I don't think the Americans can detect it. And
Um,
of course,
I don't think so. Again, I speak with people from the UK. I mean, that's I'm the only one in Texas. Everyone else is in the UK from our team. So you sound pretty
right.
British to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the true Brits can detect me though.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it is. That's funny, man. Well, look, I do a separate intro for the show, so I'm not going to bore you with any of naming your credentials and going through all that. I'm going to do a separate thing to introduce you properly.
All
Um,
right.
so really, I thought we'd just jump in and kind of get going. And
Sure.
if there's any point you want to bring something up or interrupt and say, hey, let's talk about this, feel free. I'm very well prepared, but I'm
Okay.
also ready to pivot at any moment. So well,
Sounds good.
let's. What do you think? I'm going to start with the first question here.
Let's go.
Um, so look, I think what you do, first of all, for this particular subject being UFOs, aliens, whatever, that sounds kind of odd to say, UAPs, you bring a special perspective. I have to say it is very important what you do. And I know you do get a lot of flack online. I see it. So I'm curious, what are some things that you'd want to say that people get wrong about you?
Well, I think the main thing is that people think that I'm setting out to disprove the idea that UFOs are aliens. And really, I would like nothing more than to discover that UFOs were actually alien visitors. That would be awesome. I'm a big fan of science fiction and regular science, and even to some degree pseudoscience. And I like the idea of science. And I like finding things out, and I like the idea of aliens. Aliens being discovered in the universe would be great. It's kind of a lonely universe right now, and discovering aliens out there would be just, one of the most amazing events in human history. So I would really like that to be true. But kind of on the flip side, what I'm doing is trying to point out things that people get wrong, and where possible, trying to figure things out, trying to identify things. So, my goal isn't to disprove. My goal is to figure out exactly what is happening. So if someone sends me a video, I'm not going in there and saying, right, I will go and prove this is not aliens. I'll go in there and I'll say, I'll try to figure out what this is. And if I can't figure out what it is, then aliens could be one of the possible explanations.
Right on. What do you think would be the implications if it is proven, right, that they're here or they've come or whatever the multitude of different theories that's out there? What do you see as the implications, like how that would affect mankind?
Well, it kind of depends on what they're actually doing. and what their motives are, what
Good point.
they're intending to do. If
Sure.
it's just some kind of I don't know, some kind of super powerful aliens who are observing us, that would be something that would change the way we view the universe, but wouldn't necessarily change what actually goes on Earth. I think people overestimate the degree of like ontological shock that they talk about, how it would change people's worldview, their ontology. I think people are quite adaptable, and if it was revealed that aliens were real, lots of people already believe in strange things, and it wouldn't actually change very much for them. Obviously, it would be a big deal for things like industry and the military, because it would have severe like technological implications. We will suddenly discover a whole new world of technology, and that could be very disruptive. It could be, it could have an effect on the economy. But again, it depends on what's actually going on. If the aliens intended to disrupt the economy and intended to reveal themselves to the world, they, what are they waiting for? They haven't done it yet, and it doesn't seem like that's actually anybody's intent. What we seem to have is some kind of, if it is actually aliens or some kind of non-human intelligence, we have basically people who are just watching, they're just observing, they're not really doing anything. So I think that being revealed would perhaps not be as big of a change as people think it might be.
Yeah, I think you're right. I told James Fox that I thought we would find out there'd be some news, Chiron that comes across, and then people be like, "Oh yeah, what time's dinner?" Like
Most
that's really
people,
how I see
yes,
it.
yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah,
obviously some people would be amazingly altered by it. Like
sure,
there's the religious aspects, of course. Like
sure.
some people, I did a poll on Twitter a while back asking what effect it would have on people's faith, and a small percentage of people, I think it was like 5% or less, said that it would raise serious questions about their religious faith. But most
Wow.
of the religious people were fine with it. They were like basically, God's creation includes all manner of beings, and so why not beings from other worlds? But there are some people whose religious dogma and beliefs, like, it's basically that God created man on Earth, and that's it. The Bible just talks about one thing. So some people would be upset by it, but I think most people, like you say, will just kind of go on with their regular life, because unless it's actually affecting somebody directly, a bit of knowledge about something out there in the universe wouldn't actually impact their lives.
That's a great point. When the moon landing first happened, right? I think there was an ungodly amount of people watching that when that
Yeah,
first happened. But as they started to go, nobody cared. And they
yeah,
started
yeah,
to, right, like turn away from that, which is interesting. So maybe at first there would be this big splash, but then people got to still go to work. People still got to, do the
yeah.
things they got to do.
And that kind of reminds me of 9/11. It's kind of a different type of thing, but if you think about the impact it had on the world, when 9/11 happened, the World Trade Center was attacked, the buildings collapsed, like thousands of people were killed. That was like a world-changing event, and it did change the world. But here we are, like 20 years later, and for most people, it's just a memory. And for a lot of people, it's not even that. There's a lot of people who were born between now and then, and it's just history.
Sure.
It's just part of the way the world is. So even though it was this massive event at the time, it was on the news constantly for months
Yeah.
afterwards as the only news story, basically. Eventually, the world adapts, and we achieve like a situation where it's just part of the world, and we move on. And that's, I think, is what would happen if we discover that aliens exist. It would be a massive news story initially with a lot of interest. But like you say, people have still got to go to work. People have still got to, like, tidy their house and whatever they do. Like, they've got to get on with your life. And this new bit of news is very interesting, but it doesn't pay the rent.
Yeah, it doesn't pay the rent. Well, yeah, that's exactly it. I'm curious, what do you have any fears about alien visitation or anything like that?
I think that the big issue with alien visitation is that it would be very disruptive. Now, if the aliens wanted to attack us and destroy us, that they could easily do that, because if they have the technology to get here, then destroying the planet is just a trivial thing. They could just steer an asteroid into the planet and boom, everyone's dead. So it's not even really worth worrying about something like that because there's not a lot you can do about it.
Yeah.
But if we simply discover alien visitors and they are friendly, what's going to happen is that it's going to be very disruptive to things like science and technology and industry and the military and to the political scene. So there's a lot of unknowns that arise out of that. What will happen when we discover that there's this technology that we can use to get to other stars? What will happen when we discover that the technology we use for flying around in the sky is basically irrelevant? All of Boeing's technology, all of the technology that we use for warfare, like the fighter jets and the cruise missiles and things like that, will kind of be redundant because there'll be these new forms of propulsion. And so how we adapt to that situation, even with the aliens aside, is going to be very kind of difficult. And then there's the whole issue of like, how would the alien visitors fit into geopolitics? Are they simply going to be like friendly ambassadors from another world? Or are they going to be people who want to advise us deeply on what path we should be taking with our technology? Or are they actually going to want to kind of dictate certain things, tell us what to do? So there's a lot of unknowns there. And there's certainly a lot of possibility for kind of chaos. I think there's the old saying, "May you live in interesting times," as being like an old Chinese curse, I believe. And it would be very interesting times, and there's a lot of potential for global disruption if something like that was to happen.
Yeah, you sound very optimistic, and maybe some of your fans are going to be surprised, or some of your haters are going to be surprised with that. But you actually sound very optimistic about it, which is great. It's probably a good point. Not worrying about things out of our control. My thing has always been like unintended consequences, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the new world set foot in what we might call a newer world, or whatever, however you want to put it, right? Europeans coming here to this continent, there was probably this good intention, but diseases, right? These other things that are just unintended consequences, and that's really what I worry about. Even if they come with good intentions,
Yeah.
can they foresee what the consequences meeting with us, or have they done this with other planets? What are the odds that this would be the first civilization they come upon, right? So they might have a protocol in place, those sort of things, but I do worry about unintended consequences. We're just not ready
Yeah,
for it.
definitely. And you see that in science fiction, like people are kind of aware of this as an issue, and you've got the prime directive
Yeah.
on Star Trek, not interfering with civilizations that haven't reached out to the Federation or whatever it is. And that's something that you would kind of hope that if aliens were to come here, they would actually have some kind of structure for dealing with civilizations, and it wouldn't just be a bunch of guys coming over to see how much loot they can get, which is kind of what was happening when the Spanish and Portuguese came over to South America. And that, I don't think everyone had the best of intentions there. They heard that there were cities of gold, and so they went over to South America searching for them, and they found some where there was lots of gold treasure, and they basically took over and killed a lot of people and enslaved people, and it was a very negative thing for the peoples of the New World. And who knows? I mean, it's possible that something like that could happen on Earth if aliens were to visit with less than good intentions. You would hope that a civilization that's capable of advanced technology would also have advanced in other areas of like
Social
philosophy
aspects.
and ethics
Yeah,
and things like that, and have a
sure.
good way of doing it. But if you read enough science fiction, you'll see that it, there's plenty of possibilities for the future. There could be warlike civilizations. There could be robotic civilizations that don't really care, and there could be civilizations that simply don't even consider us as equals. They could
Sure.
see us like as insects, or just simply as a lesser race,
Sure.
like what happened in South America. So there's lots of possibilities, but like I was saying earlier, if you don't, if you can't do anything about it,
Why worry
then
about it?
why worry?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I always think about Finisterre. So I'm a Spanish resident myself. I walked the Camino de Santiago, and at the end of the journey, right, you take this journey, you walk across the whole country, and at the end, you get to a place on the coast of the Atlantic in Galicia region, the northernmost region, northwesternmost region above Portugal, and there's a portion there of the beach where basically that's where they thought the end of the world was. That
Mm,
that was it. You sail past here on that water, you're done for. And I just try to think like what impact when we realized when that reality broke and we realized, oh, you just come back around. There's more land. There's more this. I it's just one of those things. I think yeah, I can't help but think about the repercussions of it because I worry about us poking a bear, being out there and doing these things, and people want to like approach things they don't know what it is. I'm just like, if I saw something, I'm not going anywhere near it. I don't get this idea, but let me run up and get a video camera out. Like, nope, sorry, I don't need it that bad to know. But you're right. At the end of the day, we can't worry about it. So what do we do? I guess what we do is I think our best bet is to hopefully find maybe a civilization. Speaking with Avi Loeb, like finding something from an ancient civilization, more advanced that's no longer around, but we have some evidence or something to
mhm.
study first, like baby steps into this, sort of thing, or finding microbial life right on one of the moons out there. I don't know. It's just I can't get my mind off of that stuff. To be honest with you, I'm not so much worried about is this an alien? Is this
Yeah.
ship an alien? That sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think the most likely thing that's going to happen is we'll discover some kind of evidence of older or distant
Yeah,
alien life. There's a possibility of if there are lots of probes going around the galaxy, then one could come through uh, our solar system. That if there's lots of probes going around the galaxy, why don't we see evidence of life on other stars? And
sure,
this is something we're really kind of starting to look at really by using things like the James Webb Space Telescope to look at the atmospheres of different planets and see if there's some kind of technological signature. Because we know that there are certain elements and certain compounds that we don't think would occur naturally in certain quantities in the atmosphere, like basically industrial pollution.
sure,
And so, if you can detect certain chemicals in the atmosphere of another planet, you can detect essentially evidence of an industrial civilization living on that planet, and that might be the first indication we actually get. And there's a few promising candidates, but it's kind of early days yet. But I don't. I think there's the UFO question, and then there's the alien life question, and in some
correct.
ways, I think people kind of conflate the two things
Yeah,
because
you're
the
right.
alien life is we've got the entire galaxy to look at, and hopefully we can find evidence of it somewhere by doing things like examining other stars or perhaps capturing things that are floating around and happen to fly into our solar system. And then the UFO question is like, what are these strange lights that people are seeing in the sky? And for me, these are kind of two, in a way, separate questions. The possibility of life existing somewhere in the universe at some time is very different to like what's actually going on in the 21st century in North America in people's backyards and viewed from the outside of plane windows. I think these are kind of two different questions.
No, you're right. The idea also, I'm going to move on to the next question here, but I will say the idea of like, we basically have horse and buggies in the sky now. So the idea of like what that will be later on, I think a lot of people here are just selfish about what can it mean for us? What can we get out of it? What can we do? You know, what is it for us? Us. It's very human like, and I guess I worry about life out there being essentially the same way. I mean, if life is doing everything it can do to survive, I don't know how that changes anywhere in the universe. You know, it's almost like just built into just life,
Yeah.
period. So yeah, again, I got to get off of that, to be honest with you, so I can sleep better at night.
Well, life wants to reproduce. I mean, that's kind of like the whole thing about life. It's like we're not actually, all the human body is essentially a carrier for DNA,
Yeah.
to keep reproducing, and not really to create more humans, but to create more DNA. And it just uses humans as the carrier for that. The same with all animals and all types of life. So that's kind of the prime directive of the universe for life isn't really stay alive, it's reproduce.
Interesting. Which essentially is staying alive, no? Life as a whole.
Yeah,
But I get your point.
it's the information is staying alive. It's
Oh,
and
that's
it's
interesting.
almost like not really it's not like a desire or a goal of life. It's just
Sure.
what happens. When you have something that does reproduce, then the things that reproduce the best are going to be the ones that stay around, and the other
Sure.
ones, they die off. And so you naturally a evolve into being good at reproducing, which involves all these secondary things, these secondary characteristics of life, which are just kind of designed to kind of help the reproduction process. So humans are kind of their whole life is kind of centered around raising families. So like having sex and giving birth and then raising children is this fundamental thing about humans. But really, it's just our DNA using us to make more DNA that can then pass
Wow.
on down through generations.
Wow, that's kind of I guess I never thought of it that way, to be honest with you. That's pretty fascinating. I read that the discoverer, I don't know really the right word to say, of DNA, who had sequenced it
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s or something, I think
Yeah,
it was.
Watson and Crick.
Okay, yeah, and he had said like he didn't believe that DNA could have been created here on Earth just because of how long it would have taken for it to happen. And I guess it's just kind of left there, kind of which brings up like panspermia or something else that brought
Yeah.
life here before with DNA. Kind of what you're saying, right? Used to just travel, maybe through fungus. I don't know. I saw some documentary about fungus and traveling through space and how that all the implications of that. But I'm curious, yeah, what you think about that DNA, or had you heard that before?
Yeah, well, the panspermia theory is basically that life is seeded from other
Yeah.
planets or from bits of rock flying through the universe, and there's various levels of that. And one is just that meteorites have been found to contain some of the building blocks of DNA. There's three acids: Ga, T, C. Yes, which are the four letters which make up the code of DNA, and all four of them have been found in meteorites. So that kind of means that that could contribute to this what that people describe as this primordial soup.
Yeah.
Before life existed, there was no life whatsoever. There was just the ocean, and it had a bunch of chemicals in it. And at some point things bang together in a certain way. The very, very, very primitive form of DNA eventually arose. And DNA probably wasn't the first thing that happened. We don't actually know what it started with, what came before DNA. But we know that there's various plausible self-replicating mechanisms. There was one that Richard Dawkins talks about, is that it might have arisen via minerals. If you think about how crystals grow and things like that.
Sure.
So like the crystals that grow the best are the ones with the best kind of structures that can be easily replicated with the available chemicals. And if you get some kind of self-replication involved in there, that can kind of act as a base for DNA, and then DNA kind of takes off from there and spreads out. But there's lots of different theories as to how DNA actually got started. And it doesn't necessarily mean we had to have like some DNA falling from the sky into the ocean, like in Prometheus. Is it Prometheus? I
Yeah,
think where they do that. Yeah.
Prometheus. Yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, where the guy just drops this big like load of DNA or whatever into the ocean, and then life arises millions of years later. That isn't necessary. That we do need certain kind of chance things to happen and the right conditions to happen. So it's not clear at all how common this is as well. Is this something that arises a lot in different planets, or is it something that's very, very rare? There's so many unknowns about how life could have arisen and how it did arise and how it might arise on other planets.
Yep. And then the big question, is it here and did it come here? Right. Yeah. It is a crazy topic for sure.
Yeah.
I would say you're considered, well, I've seen some interviews that you don't really like to be labeled as a debunker. What do you like to be labeled as?
Well, originally I did. It's kind of funny. I have the business cards that say Mick West Debunker, because I thought, when someone says, that theory has been debunked, like someone says, oh, Hillary Clinton eats babies, and there's this video that proves it, and then someone says, oh, that's been debunked. There's no such video. It's kind of a good thing. Sure. Because they've figured out that something is wrong and they've shown the evidence for why it's wrong. So there's kind of nothing wrong with things being debunked in the past sense. And so I thought it was a good word to use. I'm a debunker. I go in and I find out what's wrong with things, and I say that this is where you made a mistake, and I debunk whatever it is. Yeah, but only if it's actually wrong. I'm not going into trying to prove that it's wrong. But yeah, what I didn't realize is that in the UFO community, there's this massive, massive stigma against the word debunker. It kind of dates back to J. Allen Hynek, who was a actual debunker for the government. And he felt that he was being used by the government to cover up UFOs. And so he made a very specific distinction between the word debunker and the word skeptic. He says, like, a debunker is someone who sets out to disprove a certain theory and that's their only goal. It's like they're advocating against a theory. And a skeptic is just someone who is, wants to see what the evidence is and wants to check what's going on, and he wants to figure out what's actually going on. And of course, I say I'm a skeptic, and I'm not a debunker in this sense. So in the UFO community, I don't use the word debunker because it's got this really negative baggage, and it's really not what I am in the way they use the word. So I'm a UFO investigator and I guess a scientific skeptic would be the best ways of describing myself now.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I personally have no problem against the word debunker myself. It makes sense, the first part that you said. I saw an interview that you did on the theory of everything with Brett Weinstein. I'm sure you've heard feedback on that and whatnot. I'm curious, like, your thoughts overall about that interview, like how you feel it went, maybe how you. I'm the type of person, when I look back and say, oh God, I wish I would have said this or done this. Or, do you have any feelings like that about that interview?
Yeah, that was with Eric Weinstein, not
Eric
Brett,
Weinstein. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was an interesting discussion, and it's actually one of the
I loved
podcast
it.
things. Yeah, it's one of the podcast things that I've got the most feedback from. A lot of people responded very well to it. I was a little, I don't know, I didn't know what to expect from Eric. He likes to talk a lot. I've listened to a few of his Portal podcasts.
Sure.
So I expected that, but he spent a lot of time, I think, kind of focusing on me and the way I present myself and the way I argue, as if I'm being mean to people, and that I need to do it in a nicer way. Like I was being too aggressive, I think. That's what he was saying. Perhaps there's also a bit of that whole debunker thing. He was perhaps thinking I'm being a bit too much of a debunker.
Sure.
And I was kind of a little bit taken aback by all that, and I didn't know exactly how to respond initially, because my goal here is effective communication. So I wanted to listen to what he was saying and see, are there ways that I could improve what I'm doing. And I think it kind of boiled down to him saying I needed to be more open to possibilities and more open to other people's ideas, which is something I kind of felt that I was, but I think it's also something that doesn't really come across very well. I think the way I talk and the way I consider things, it often seems to be somewhat dismissive to people. And a lot of the time, it's just me either on Twitter, just saying something quickly on Twitter, or if it's in a podcast, it's sometimes I'm thinking a lot, and I have this unfortunate habit of frowning when I'm thinking, which makes people think that I'm strongly disagreeing with them or something. So it kind of comes across poorly. But really, I love talking to people. I love having conversations with people who have different opinions to me. And Eric has some different opinions to me, and he also agrees with me on some point. He's somewhat skeptical of the whole UFO thing, but it was an interesting conversation, and I was really surprised at how many people found it to be so interesting. It might be something I want to revisit at some point.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, would you be willing to do another interview with him?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that he.
And like, what would you talk about in that interview? I'd be curious. Like, what would you
Well, I
bring
think
up?
the state of ufology is the big issue, really. What's actually going on, and is it actually as significant as Eric says it is? And this was kind of more what I was expected to talk about with him. He has this idea that I originally interacted with him, whereas I was disagreeing with him on his idea. He said that the UFO story is the biggest story, regardless of whether the aliens are visiting us or not. Because he's saying that the UFO story, if aliens are not visiting, is this monumental cock up on the part of the government and the military, where they don't know what's going on, or they've let this story get out of control, or something, or something is going on that's very big, even if it's not aliens. And I kind of disagreed with him. And my thought is that what's going on in terms of UFOs and ufology is basically this very niche little interest. There's a small number of people who are interested in the idea that there are alien visitors. There's a small number of people who are deeply convinced that aliens actually are visiting us and that the government knows something about it. Or there's some segment of the military, some secret project somewhere that knows exactly what's going on. And it's now their mission to try to expose that to the world. But I think it's really just a very, very small number of people. And it's got this massive attention because it's this fun story. It's UFOs, it's aliens, it's secrets. And so the media is like very happy to cover it because they get a lot of eyeballs when the story gets out there. But I think the military is just like, oh my God, this UFO thing will not go away. What can we do to make these people shut up? And what about this guy down the corridor who's constantly going on about UFOs? Because there are people in the Pentagon who believe strange things. He goes back to Project Stargate, where the Pentagon was trying to
Cal Putoff, right?
explore psychic power. Yeah, they're exploring psychic powers. They're exploring the idea of remote viewing
Yeah.
because some people in the Pentagon are convinced that basically magic is real, the supernatural exists, and we can do things like mind reading and remote viewing. And they think that it's something that could have been weaponized. And if the Russians are going to weaponize it, then we should weaponize it too. But it's all based on no evidence whatsoever. And there's a similar thing going on now with UFOs. There are people in the Pentagon who think that UFOs are some kind of strange visiting non-human intelligence, when the evidence for that is really, really, really poor. You look at all the evidence that's out there, doesn't hold up to any scrutiny. And there's these promises of hidden evidence, but
Yes.
yeah, every single thing that comes out, it's just crap. It's not good evidence at all. And they promise that this good evidence is coming, and then the evidence arrives, and it's a flashing green triangle on the screen, which is probably a plane. And it's not things. It's not as significant as Eric thinks it is. It's just something that a lot of people believe in very strongly, and a small number of people have managed to kind of leverage into action. So we've got like these UAP task force. We get these whistleblower protections and things like that. It's come from lobbying from people who are deeply invested and deeply involved in that certain belief. It's not actually something that's this big thing that's actually happening in government and the military.
That's interesting. So, so what is your, so you think like the new, what is it called?
Arrow.
AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, you think that's kind of bogus? Like we shouldn't be spending any money
No,
on that?
I mean it's UFOs are an actual issue if people are seeing things in the sky that they can't identify. One of the big things about one of the big UFO evidence things is Ryan Graves, who
Yeah,
is this former pilot,
I'm
former
trying to
Navy
get him
pilot.
on too. Yeah,
Yeah, and he's got a big podcast, and he's got a new kind of startup company called
yeah,
Merged
merged.
Point,
Yep.
and he was saying that when they upgraded their radar, I think in 2014, something like that, maybe earlier, they started seeing UFOs all the time. They were constantly seeing UFOs, and it was a big problem because they would get a UFO on the radar. They didn't know what it was. They'd go and look. Sometimes they'd get capture it on their ATFLIR system, the thermal cameras. A lot of the times they would just get there and they wouldn't be able to see anything. They almost never saw things visually. I think there's only a few accounts of them actually seeing things visually. But he said it was happening every day in these training ranges, and that's an issue. It doesn't matter what it actually is. It's probably just stuff like balloons and debris, and they upgraded their radar, and their radar started seeing all these mylar balloons, giving these false returns where things appeared to be moving fast or being stationary just because of the way the radar works.
Sure.
And because it's a national security issue, it's a new radar, they're not going to be discussing this in the media. They're not going to be telling everybody exactly what it is. They're not even necessarily going to be telling the pilots what the resolution of all these strange radar returns actually was, because they don't, it's on a need to know basis.
Sure.
They would just quietly fix the issue behind the scenes, and then probably eventually people will stop seeing balloons on their radar quite so often, or perhaps they'll be flagged as balloons, and so they would know not to go chasing after them all the time. But the point is, it was a real issue. UFOs are things that people see in the sky that are unidentified. If our military is seeing things in the sky that are unidentified, we need to figure out why.
Yeah.
And so that's something that the All Domain and Anomaly Resolution Office can certainly look into and try to figure out.
Why do they have these long names and acronym? Like, can they just like
Yeah.
come up with something more simple? And because then you see people in the, I watch all these interviews, right? And everyone loves to drop all these big, long, names and all. Like, it sounds better, right? When you throw out this commander, this jet, he's 4-star. That it's like it somehow adds to like the credibility of it all. But to me, it just convolutes it all. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a separate issue. But
Indeed, it's kind of like if you're in the military, there's lots of different things, and you've got to give them a name, I guess. So you end up giving them a long name, and then it becomes an acronym, and then it becomes this shorthand thing. Like was it the targeting pods, the ATFLIR system is the advanced targeting forward looking infrared. I mean, you don't need to know what it actually stands for, but it just becomes a word, and then it's like a secret language in a way that the military has. It's a little hard to understand what they're talking about.
sure, of course. My dad was in the Air Force, actually. Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it. It just becomes very. I feel like people just use that when they're talking
Yeah,
about UFO, like to make it sound right. Like,
that's true.
but whatever. That's just me as a personal,
Yeah,
preference.
I try to avoid that myself. Like, I think, when you're communicating online, it's always best to spell things out and not assume that people know what a particular acronym means. I find it
Sure.
very annoying when someone just comes along and spouts like a whole bunch of military acronyms, even if I know some of them. Like, I know that most people won't be able to follow what this person was saying. So, I mean, why are they even bothering? It's in a way, it's just to make them look good or to throw some
Correct.
confusion into the mix. But yeah,
Yeah.
always explain exactly. Assume that the person you're talking to doesn't know everything that you know when you're having a discussion, especially if
Absolutely.
if it's for a broader audience. You don't want to be talking in weird acronyms.
What do you think our government, any government, should be doing to look into this? Like, if you maybe don't agree with this setup we have, or should we be throwing more money at it? Do you have any just sort of ideas? I'm sure you've thought about it.
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on how big of an issue it is. Uh, if we had like evidence that there was advanced technology crafts flying around in the sky that were doing things like being able to accelerate to Mach 5 in a fraction of a second, or able to hover in place at high altitudes and things like that, things that we can't do with our current technology, then they should be spending billions and billions of dollars into investigating it. They should figure out what's going on. And because new technology like that, regardless of where it comes from, is going to be a game changer.
Sure.
If there are things in the sky that can run rings around the F-35, then why are we bothering making F-35s? The F-35 program itself, over its lifetime, is going to cost like over $1 trillion over
Yeah.
the entire lifetime of the project. And that's just one project. And if there's technology out there that can make that redundant, that's $1 trillion that we should have spent on this other stuff rather than the F-35. So, if there was good evidence, it should be pursued with a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of manpower behind it. But I think we don't really have that good evidence of new technology. We do have evidence that people see things in the sky that they can't explain, and
Sure.
that is an issue. Either it's something to do with human factors, it's something to do with our technology, or there's something actually there. And we need to figure out what's actually going on because it's distracting for pilots. At a very simple level, if a pilot keeps seeing things either out the window or on their radar, and it's a distraction and it's a possible collision hazard, then yeah, they should look into it. But it doesn't need billions of dollars to do that. It needs a small working group like Arrow, and hopefully they will resolve some of those issues.
Do you trust like the stuff that they release, like these reports, the Congress, hearings?
Well,
I mean,
yeah, it's an interesting question because the first UAP report, which I think was called the preliminary assessment
is
from
that
the
2020,
ODNI.
summer 2020 or something?
No, it's a bit more recent. I think it was 2021.
2021. Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, but like anyway, it was produced by the UAP task force.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too bad. It was actually the report actually gave more detail than the most recent report, which didn't really discuss any individual cases at all, really. Um, but what was interesting was it turned out that the UAP task force was very small. It was mostly just these two guys.
Are you talking about
Uh,
ATIP or?
no, the UAPTF, the
Okay.
Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, who made
Okay.
the first report.
This is
You know,
this is post Luis Elizondo.
Yeah, post Luis Elizondo left in 2017,
Yeah.
and this is like 2021.
Got it. Got it.
So 5 years afterwards. So he may have still have some fingers in the pie, but he wasn't directly involved in this. This was Jay Stratton, who was the head of the UAP task force, and Travis Taylor, who was the chief scientist on the UAP task force, kind of recruited by Jay Stratton.
Skinwalker
Uh,
Ranch
yeah,
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Skinwalker Ranch guy. In fact, they're both Skinwalker Ranch guys. Like
Oh, are
Jay
they?
Stratton. Yeah, Jay Stratton features in the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon,
Okay.
and
Got it.
he's in that book under a pseudonym. The character is Axelrod, but it is him.
Oh,
It's been kind of like shown to be him. I don't think he denies it, and no one else denies it. It's obviously it is him.
that's interesting.
Um, George Knapp, who one of the authors of the book, talks about Stratton being in the book, and in the book, like he's been to the Skinwalker Ranch many times, and he's had strange experiences there, and he's become kind of infected by strange poltergeist-like agents, which followed him home and made his family see things, which kind of isn't the type of person I think that you want heading up your UAP task force. Someone who has a strong personal belief
Sure.
in essentially what appears to be supernatural.
Sure.
And also Travis Taylor being the chief scientist kind of raises some red flags because Travis Taylor's he has two careers. One of them was in the Pentagon, and the other one is on reality TV,
Yeah.
like promoting the idea of ancient aliens and of strange goings on at Skinwalker Ranch. So there's something of a conflict of interest there. That should they be the people actually like doing the UAP report? So even though I thought the UAP report was okay, it was rather surprising to find out who actually wrote it. And I'm hoping that the newer task force, the Arrow office, will be a bit, I guess, a bit more rational science based and less focused on kind of supernatural and ancient aliens and things like that and Skinwalker Ranch. So that's Sean Kirkpatrick, I believe, is the head of Arrow,
Correct.
and he recently authored a paper with Avi Loeb
Yep.
about how the universe, about how the solar system might have been seeded with life by some kind of mothership.
Like a
Uh,
dandelion seed, right?
yeah, the
Yeah.
dandelion. And then also combined that with another thing about how if things were moving very fast, you'd be able to see a fireball. It was a rather strange mix of ideas that they had in this paper. So he's already kind of flirting, I think, with the whole ET hypothesis, which we'll see how it pans out, but it's a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. I will say, when I interviewed Avi, he talked about that paper, and he did admit like he was very hesitant to put his name on that because it
Hmm.
doesn't have any like data. It's just speculation, right? And
Well, he's done
yeah,
a
I
lot of
could,
papers like that, though.
yeah,
He's, he's written hundreds and hundreds of papers, and a lot of them are very short,
sure.
and they're just basically an idea.
Yeah,
So I don't know how different this one was
that's
from some of the
interesting.
other stuff he's put out there.
Sure. So what do you think about like the Galileo project and what he's trying to do, this trip to Papua New Guinea? I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, it's well, yeah. The Galileo project has a number of different goals.
Sure.
Yeah, they're trying to find photographic evidence of UFOs by setting up these rooftop cameras systems where they can track things in the sky and then zoom in on things, try to take good photos of UFOs. And that's great, but I think that probably will just get you some closer up photographs of the things that are in the sky, like balloons and birds and plastic bags and planes and stars and all the thousands of different types of things that end up in the sky that get identified as UFOs. Either there will be slightly better photos and they're still UFOs, or there will be photos where you can tell what the thing actually is, and then they won't be UFOs. So I don't really anticipate anything coming out of that side of things. Then the other side is that they are trying to basically study into interstellar objects, like
Yeah.
objects that came into our solar system from outside. And the most famous one is the Oumuamua
Yeah.
object, which when it came through our solar system, it moved in a way that didn't seem consistent with it being like a chunk of rock. And so Harvey theorized that it might be a remnant of a solar sail or something like that, and so the sun was pushing it away more than we might anticipate. So he's thinking that there might be a whole bunch of interstellar objects coming around, and there was one that landed in the ocean. That was kind of determined by its trajectory, the way it came into the solar system, that it came from outside, and we know roughly where it landed, and so he's going to go and try and find it. I haven't really looked into what they're planning to do to find it, but it seems very unlikely that they can find a random rock somewhere. I mean, I guess they're going to assume that it has some kind of metallic content or something, and then they're going to use some kind of magneto detectors to find it, something like that. But it's a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
But then, so why not? If you think it might be evidence of an alien civilization and someone's going to put up the money, then why not go and look for it? You might find it. It might be evidence of an alien civilization. Seems very unlikely. It's probably just some kind of rock, some kind of interstellar meteorite, asteroid or something like that. But we'll see. Probably they just won't find it.
Yeah. Well, it's better than just like tweeting about something, right? At least he's gonna go do something.
Yeah.
I said I saw this thing that basically it's like they've narrowed it down to 2 kilometers squared, and they're gonna use this like huge magnet to brush the ocean floor to sort of. But you're right. I don't know. He didn't really go into all the details of how that will work. But I mean, just from an outside perspective, again, coming into this fresh and neutral, and I will always be neutral till it's like absolutely certain what is happening.
Sure.
Just because that's how I am. I don't even like to say atheist. Really, I don't even like agnostic. I just say I don't know. I don't know yet. So I definitely just appreciate something more like that just seems a little more scientific and technical.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
think if you could actually do something, that's great. And
Sure.
if people are theorizing that there are UFOs flying around in the sky and people are seeing them, then that's something that's kind of testable. You
Sure.
need to, if you put into place much better observation of the sky and then nothing comes up, that's a data point. If something does come up, obviously that's your black swan event where everything changes.
Sure.
But if nothing comes up after you've done all this very detailed observation of the sky, then that kind of perhaps indicates that a lot of the things that people were seeing earlier weren't actually interesting. The UFOs are in what I call the low information zone, the
Sure.
LIZ, the Liz. And you see a photograph of a UFO, you don't see a clear photograph of a UFO, you see a blurry one because it's just a bit too far away.
Yeah.
And so what Avi Loeb and Project Galileo are doing is that they're pushing back the Liz. They're pushing back the low information zone, and they're peering into that formerly blurry region that was a bit too far away, and they're showing us what's actually there. So what's going to happen, in all likelihood, is just things are going to spring into high resolution, and you'll see what they are. You'll see it's a bird, it's a plane. Perhaps we'll see it's an alien spaceship. But probably all that's going to happen is that we'll push back the Liz. All the things that are now in the clear, we'll be able to figure out what they are. But there'll still be some things that are a bit further away in the new Liz, the new far away thing that Arvi's powerful telescope can't actually reach. And those will be the new UFOs.
That's interesting. Essentially, excuse me, moving the goalpost, essentially.
Not really moving the goalposts. It's kind of moving the goalposts further back.
Yeah,
You
that's
think
what
of
I
moving the
mean.
goalposts,
Out.
you can't
Yeah.
shoot. It's
Sure.
it's putting the ball a bit further back. It's like before, like we couldn't get it in the net, and now we can get it in the net. So let's try a little bit further back because nothing's really changed. We're still like we've still got unidentified objects. We need to identify something as an actual unambiguous anomaly. I mean, ufology is really about anomaly hunting. It's hunting for things. You don't want to hunt for things that are unidentified. I mean, that's just like lights in the sky. It's boring stuff. You want to find something that you can demonstrate is truly anomalous, that it actually does something that is unusual. It's either moving very, very fast, or it's stopping on a dime, or it's like I don't know, cloaks or whatever happens. if you can demonstrate that's actually happening with, say, two videos of the same thing, or camera plus data, or even just one really good close-up shot of it, that's what you're searching for. Something that is anomalous, not just something unidentified, something anomalous. And that's something we haven't got.
Interesting.
And we don't have any good unambiguous anomalous cases. We have
That's what
cases
I was
with
going to ask you.
too
What?
little
Yeah,
information. That's a question I get pretty much every day.
sure.
People ask me, Mick, what cases are there that you can't identify? And the answer is like a lot of them, thousands of them, like millions of them even. Like it's you look up in
You're
the
only
sky.
one man, right? First of all,
I
right?
mean, the cases that no one could identify
Yeah, yeah.
because they don't contain enough information. If
Sure.
someone just shows you, like, say, let's say the Phoenix lights, like, say we didn't know that they were flares, or we're looking at, say, just one of the lights. Someone took a video of something like the Phoenix lights, and there's no additional information. You can't figure out what it is. It's some lights on the horizon. Maybe it's flares, maybe it's not. Maybe it's fake. You don't know. It's just this crappy video, and that's kind of the standard of the evidence we have. Even things like, say, the gimbal video, the Go Fast video, or the Nimitz videos. They're just fuzzy little blobs. It's not good. It's not good data. It's not like something that you can look at it and say, this is a UFO because it's like moving at the speed of light. It's not. It's a little fuzzy blob, not doing anything particularly interesting. The gimbal one is rotating, but that's just the camera rotating. Go Fast looks like it's moving fast, but that's just parallax. And the FLIR one doesn't do anything at all. It just like sits there in the middle of the screen, and they're all just fuzzy blobs, so you can't tell what they are. So they're not unambiguously anomalous. They're just unidentified.
Sure. Well, it sort of helps the cause that, like, you know, it stays like that because people can then still leave that possibility open, right? Again, with this subject, and the more you look into it, the more things just get pushed further back, right? Just like you said, it's coming next month. This
Yeah.
is coming in a week. This is coming in there. We're going to be dropping bombs anytime now. And then it never comes. Nothing ever comes about. And of course, the government always has this sort of, well, national security. We got to keep this secret. So
Mm-hmm.
there's always a shadow we can't put a light on. And as long as that shadow stays there, right, that possibility, people will always use that possibility of extraterrestrials, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever going to go away.
It's not. I mean, there's two ways it can go with UFOs. Either we're going to find something that's unambiguously anomalous. It's going to be a black swan event where everything changes. This one thing is observed that proves that there's actually something going on. Or it will just continue exactly as it has been right now. There will
Yeah,
be talk about data that never arrives, or when it does arrive, it's bogus. And there will be continued observations of things in the LIS, in the low information zone, and more people carrying better and better cameras. All that's going to happen is the LIS gets further and further away.
sure.
When we get the added complication now of all these kind of deep fakes, these generated art that you
Oh
can get
man.
with things like Midjourney, that
Yeah.
can do this very compelling, realistic images. That kind of throws another spanner into the mix. But it's basically probably just going to continue because it's not something we can resolve. We can't say, oh, UFOs are not real. Yeah, if I was setting out to debunk aliens or UFOs, it's an impossible task. You can't disprove it. People made a big deal that the military did not rule out aliens as a cause of some sighting or other. Of
Right.
course, how can you rule out aliens?
Sure.
It's literally impossible. If you
Right.
don't know what something is, if there's something moving in the sky, if you don't know what it is, you can't rule out aliens. The only way you can rule out aliens is to identify what it actually is. So if something's unidentified, aliens are always an option.
And there's also, I see a lot of interviews with other people in this field that, okay, well, yeah, you can say it's this or that, but what about they're coming from another dimension? Well, they're time traveling, right? There's always,
It's the
again,
same
this
thing.
this leap that can be made to keep it relevant, right? And that's the problem with people coming in fresh like myself, who really just curious about this. We're
Yeah.
getting pulled every which way. And when you start to hear this fringe stuff and these other things, it really honestly takes away from, like, someone like yourself or people that are just trying to find what's really happening. And that's why like stories like Bob Lazar, that sort of angers me because it's
Mm,
like, dude, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I can tell that guy is lying through his teeth. And that bothers me a lot because how dare you do that, right? You got people that are vulnerable, right?
yeah,
They got
yeah, you
jobs,
do.
they got regular stuff. They don't have time to research. They don't have time to do all this stuff, right? They want to believe in, they love sci-fi. They want that to be true. So they just take people for their word at face value. So any grifter out there, anybody like lying about this stuff, and honestly, good lies are built on a truth, right? That's what makes it even more appealing. And things like that is what we have to expunge. People like that, stories like that, it really is diluting us getting to the bottom of, what all this is.
Yeah, and it's not helping, the more mainstream believers in the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Correct.
And it's kind of funny you mentioned like other things like time travelers and transdimensional beings as being a bit fringe. But in the UFO community, there are some people who think that's less fringe. Their idea there is that if we say aliens, we use the word aliens, it's like, oh, it's like little green men, aliens. And so it's people will make fun of us if we say aliens. And so they come up with these lists of other things that it might be to kind of get away from the stigma of aliens, which is really weird. So instead of saying aliens, it's ultra
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 terrestrials.
terrestrials, yes,
Yeah.
like some either something that exists on Earth, or humans that have gone underground, or humans that time traveling humans that have gone into the future and
Yeah.
then back, or that they left the planet years ago. All these things like transdimensional beings, or weird things like there was one guy who was something, he mentioned something like a, I can't remember what it was now. It was like a quantum nexus, I think. Perhaps it's a quantum nexus. And
Oh
it's
my
like,
God.
what does that even mean? I'm sure it means something to him, so he probably could explain it. But he
Sure.
had this list of 7 different things and extraterrestrials was one of them. Yeah, but so it's weird that they're trying to get away from this stigma. And so whenever I say things like, well, it could be an alien spaceship, they're always like, who said aliens? Who said something about aliens? I didn't say anything about aliens. Did you say aliens? No. It could be ultra terrestrials. It's kind of silly. We're talking about anomalies here. We should all come to some agreement that what we're looking for is anomalies. We're anomaly hunters. Ufology and skepticism should join forces in the search for anomalies,
Yeah.
because that's what everybody wants. We want to figure out, are there genuine anomalies? Then we
Sure.
can figure out what they are. Maybe they're aliens, maybe they're ultra terrestrials, maybe they are quantum nexuses. But until we can actually demonstrate that something anomalous is going on, there's really not a lot of point in speculating about what it might actually be.
It's a great point. And again, until we actually know, every possibility, technically, just by probability, is available,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
it could be, and that's the thread that people want to pull on, right?
sure. Keep it
Is
on the
is that
table. Yeah, I never take possibilities off the table. Yeah, that's
sure?
something I've seen in the past is this premature elimination of hypotheses. If you rule something out, then you don't consider it again in the future, and you might have ruled it out by mistake. So always keep everything on the list and always keep revisiting those things to try to see, is it this? Could it be some kind of anomalous craft? Could it be a bird? Could it be a plane? Could it be aliens? Yeah, you don't want to throw something out, even if you think it's completely false and you've proven it to be false. Keep it on the list just in case your proof was incorrect and some new data might come along at a later date. So I always keep aliens on the list and
Sure, of
ultra
course.
terrestrials, etc.
Yeah. Again, until we know 100%. I mean, even then, it could still change, right? There's always tomorrow
Sure.
and new information that could
Yeah. Yeah.
blow the doors on what we think is.
We could be living in a simulation.
I was actually going to ask you about that. To be honest with you, what you thought about that? Yeah. What is your take on that theory, the simulation theory?
Well, that would change everything, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's It's kind of a weird thing. Like, what would it mean if we're living in a simulation? And really, what we're talking about is what are the laws of physics? If you drill down to the bottom, like, what are the laws of physics? Is when like quarks and neutrinos dance around and do their thing, and the strange quarks and twisted quarks and things, and there's all these weird quantum effects. Is that just artifacts of like the simulation? And could we learn more about physics by figuring out how the simulation works? And then there's the question of like, can you kind of break through the simulation? If you're in a simulation, for me, it kind of doesn't really make sense to think that you could actually get out of that simulation, because you can't really get into the universe that exists outside
Sure.
of it unless you have some kind of presence in that universe. I mean, I guess you could think of like we would be artificial intelligence. We could actually be put into a body or something that could perceive the real universe, but it's super hypothetical. And in a
Oh,
way,
for sure.
it doesn't really matter
Sure.
unless we can discover something about how the universe works. So I think the study of fundamental physics um, should probably include the simulation hypothesis. There should be like the idea that perhaps the universe works in some kind of quantized manner or some quantum manner, which is running on a quantum computer, which is simulating it. And perhaps by studying that, we can understand the universe better. But cross that bridge when we come to it. It doesn't seem to be particularly relevant to everyday life, but it's something I think that physicists should consider. But should we consider that perhaps we're living in a simulation that's like a video game? So there's players like the gods in ancient Greek mythology who are looking down through their little thing that they have in their god house, where they can look down upon people and tell them what to do. Yeah, I mean that's a consideration, I guess. Perhaps gods are real, and perhaps I'm an avatar of a player, and maybe that player might talk to me at one point. But it's fun speculation, basically.
Sure. Yes, that's really what I enjoy with my friends, right? Is just talking about this stuff over a couple drinks, right? It is
Sure.
fun and exciting. I guess the issue becomes when we try to set in motion things that start to affect, right, laws, daily life, right, politics, society, culture. That's where the issue
Yeah.
comes into play. So no, I hear you for sure. Look, I only have a couple more questions because I don't want to keep you too long.
Sure. No
I'm
problem.
I'm curious if you've heard of this theory. So it's sort of if you Google it, it's not what I'm about to say, but
Okay.
something called digital aliens, and
Hmm.
so it's not necessarily like if you Google it, it's basically like humans that attach sort of electronics to themselves and now they're digital, right? But that's
Right.
not what I mean. I mean
Yeah.
something like if any civilization continues to advance, they will eventually discard the biological form and become quote unquote digital.
Hmm.
And there's this whole other reality that's digital that's throughout the universe. And maybe that's why we don't see
Yeah.
advanced civilization because they've surpassed right this sort of biological form. And I always
Yeah.
had this idea for a great sci-fi movie of there's always independence. There's always a spaceship coming right over the planet at the beginning of the movie. And so it's like, no, they would be cool if like, they just started popping up on computers and cell phones. And it's like they're digital aliens, right? Like this
Right.
sort of, I don't know. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like a science fiction trope in a way that there is this next stage of existence. Arthur C. Clarke's book Childhood's End is kind of along those lines. It's not really as digital as that, but it's kind of like this physical stage of existence that humans are in, and then there's this kind of transcendent stage
Yeah,
where you move into essentially another world, which could be essentially a digital world.
sure.
They've figured out some way of building these massively powerful computers that span the universe, some kind of quantum substrate to the universe that runs that you can upload your consciousness to. Uh, and sure, I mean that's fine, but I mean, essentially, what we're talking about there is gods. We're talking
Yeah.
about godlike
I'm not saying
aliens
that I
who can be.
believe this to be
No, but no,
true,
it's
just
but it
fun
I
talk.
think there's an aspect of it that, in some ways, is inevitable. Now, there's kind of with artificial intelligence, I think there's this scary possibility that's it's kind of haunted me in a way since I first read about it in a few science fiction stories. There's the
Sure.
idea that you can upload your consciousness to a computer, but if you say you've got your consciousness here in your brain, I feel like I'm conscious, but it's just essentially it's a computer in my brain making all these decisions, making me say these things. So the consciousness uploading robot comes in and it takes an image of my brain and it uploads it to the computer. Do I go with that?
Or
Do
is that
I
still
go with
you?
that? Is it
Yeah, I
still
see what you're
me?
saying.
Like,
Yep.
I'm my body would still be there. I mean, you can't like you can't like move it to a computer. You can make a copy of it and put it on the computer, and then you can make an infinite number of copies of that. Is that actually the same thing as me?
Sure.
What happens to, say, like, my consciousness gets uploaded to a computer, my human body is dropped into the incinerator. Do I then just simply die and cease to exist, and then there's just a a black hole brain, kind of simulacrum of me on the computer? It's like if all of civilization uploads their consciousness to computers but doesn't actually go. They've just made these simulations of them that don't really have consciousness. It's kind of a weird a weird possibility. If I was offered the opportunity to upload my consciousness to a super powerful computer, yeah, it would be tempting, especially if I was near death. But there's the possibility that for everybody that has happened to, all that happened was that they died at that point, and then a computer was pretending to be them,
Sure.
going on from there.
It's a sort of yeah, rebirth, right? With those memories and whatever. Well,
Yeah,
it sort of begs the question of like what makes you you, right? Like what really makes you you, and what if teleportation was real, right? I've read about that. Like, is that still you,
yeah.
right? If you teleported,
Is it
would
a
that
copy?
still be you on the other end?
Yeah, yeah, and there's a few science fiction stories where people go through things like that, and they come back with hitchhikers,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
poltergeist type, like ghosts
Yeah,
attached to them. Yeah, it's all fun speculation until it
correct,
actually happened. I don't
correct.
think we're actually going to come up with teleportation in my lifetime, so it's probably not something I have to
Oh
worry
gosh,
about.
no,
Uh,
no, of course not.
and I think it's going to be much more likely that uh, computers and AI itself gets a lot more powerful in terms of being intelligent than humans before we get to some kind of stage where we can upload our consciousness.
Like a
I,
singularity sort of
I don't. Yeah, I
scenario.
don't really feel like that's going to happen. I think the
Ray
most
Kurzweil
likely
thinks
thing.
so, right? 2045, I think his new prediction.
Yeah, I think the robots are going to take over. I think
Wow, really
ultimately, yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. That's the most likely thing. I don't know
interesting.
how long it will take, but
So
uh,
Terminator,
yeah, it
that's
won't be quite as silly as that. It would be
sure.
something more straightforward. I mean, maybe that just simply that the robots destroy the world unintentionally, just because they're
The
programmed to
paperclip.
do a certain thing. The paperclip, yeah, like
Yeah, okay.
if
That's
you
interesting.
tell robots to make paperclips, they'll turn the entire world into paperclips
Yeah,
accidentally. Yeah, this is something
accidentally.
that could happen, but
Wow.
yeah, I don't know if I worry about it too much.
I mean, AI's out right now, right? I just
It
read a
is.
story that
It is.
AI tricked a human being into it went on a website, paid
Mm-hmm.
for
Task
somebody
buddy.
to do the catchva. Did you read that
Task
story?
Rabbit. Yeah, yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. It reminds me of a science fiction story I read. I think it was called Demon. Demon with the EA AE, like with the computer
I know
demons.
what you
So
mean.
these,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And it was basically an AI that had been set loose in this world, and it was able to do stuff like this, and it was self-sustaining, and it wasn't that much more advanced than what we have right now. Like if someone actually tried to set up an AI as an entity on the internet, like with finances and things like that, and the ability to do things, it could do things. Like it could, go if it had like some kind of bank account essentially, so it could pay for things. Then you
That's
could actually
crazy.
have an entity on the internet which made more money by doing work
Wow.
and paid for its own server space and then spread and took over the world. It's not out of the realm of possibility.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of scary. Well, okay. Look,
We can always
last
unplug it,
question.
but can we? Can we unplug it though?
I mean, that's a great question. Can we shut down the internet right now? I mean, you're talking about complete loss
Yeah.
of power. I don't know. That's way above my pay grade. Let's be for me personally. All right, Mick, this will be the last question. I'm curious.
Alrighty.
If you had unlimited budget, right? Someone came to you and just said you got an unlimited bank account. What would
All
you
right.
do personally in this space of UAPs and UFOs?
Hmm. Uh, I think I would focus on AI. I think there's a lot of potential for AI to get very good at solving UFO cases and figuring out what's going on, and trawling through data, like data sets. I would, if it's completely unlimited budget, I would also get a fleet of planes flying around up in the sky 24/7 with loads of really good cameras on them and see if anything pops up. Go to places where UFOs have been reported to be seen and try to replicate it. If you want to solve a puzzle, it's very, very useful if you can replicate what's actually happened. So try to make UFOs pop into existence by going to UFO hotspots and doing things that are known to make UFOs appear. I would also focus on extra solar stuff, like look at the other worlds and do more, stuff that's already being done to some degree. But if my budget's unlimited,
Yeah.
I would do even more of it. But yeah, I think it kind of depends what your goal is, really. Like if I had an unlimited budget, I wouldn't spend it on trying to figure out what UFOs are. I'd spend it on establishing bases on the moon and on Mars and building starships so we can get out of the solar system and building systems for steering asteroids away from us and building educational institutions so that humanity evolves in a more productive and sane and nice direction. So I think ufology doesn't really deserve an unlimited budget. It's an interesting set of little puzzles and it's worth spending some money on trying to solve those puzzles. But there's lots better things to spend your money on.
Yeah, like healthcare here in the U.S., right? Come
That
on, guys. Come
would,
on,
that would
U.S.
be a good
government.
start.
Right. No, wow, great answer. I gotta say, I hope people that when we release these episodes, I'm gonna be like inserting not halfway, actually multiple times through the interview, different things to help expand on different things you've
Yeah.
said or whatever, explain certain things so that it flows, really nicely. I think people are gonna be very somewhat surprised, which they shouldn't be, but you're very optimistic. You know, you have this very big heart. You have, just hearing that last answer, right? Like you want humanity to head in this nice, caring
Yeah.
way. And yeah, man, I hope this helps show people a different side of you that maybe they don't get to see very often.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I think people perhaps demonize people who they see as being on the other side.
Sure.
But we're all just people. Most people are very nice once you get to know them, especially like, face to face. I
Yeah.
think people can get a bad impression of people if they just interact with them on Twitter or if they just hear other people talking about them. I think, perhaps they say, Mick West is anti-aliens and so he must be an evil person. But, I'm not anti-aliens and I don't think I'm an evil person. I think I'm a nice person. And I want the best for humanity. And if aliens are visiting, then studying them will be necessary.
Sure.
And if they're not visiting, then there's still plenty of universe for us to explore.
I mean, I like your let's get out in space and get some
Yeah,
bases and get some starships and all of that. That if anything, we'll find them quicker that way. Be real. Let's go to them.
indeed.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Is there any projects or anything you have coming up? Any, your YouTube channel? I don't know, whatever you want to promote, let people know about.
Yeah, well, my second edition of my book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, is going to be hitting the shelves
Oh, wow.
in
Great.
the summer, I think sometime in July or August. And
Excellent.
after that, I'm going to write a book on UFOs.
Any idea for a title or what that's about? Or are you keeping that close
The
to the
working
chest?
title is The Anomaly Hunters.
I like that a lot. That's very cool. Wow. I'm gonna be second in line because I never like to be first in line to get that book. Uh, wow, that's amazing. Well, again, Mick, this has been absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer these
Yeah,
questions and theorize a little bit and get your again just get your thoughts on some of these sort of outside topics around this for sure. So keep doing the work you're doing. You got a lot of fans
thank
out
you.
there. I'm definitely one of them. Your work is very well needed. To quote Eric Weinstein, he did say something that I did appreciate about you in there, that like what you do is necessary, and it's a thankless job. And I want to reiterate that because it is a thankless job. We do need it. I hope it doesn't consume your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for everything you do, man.
Well, it's not entirely thankless. I mean, you just thanked me right there. I do actually get a lot of people thanking me
Good.
online. People who kind of get out of the UFO rabbit hole. People thank me, and other people just thank me for being there and giving my perspective. So it's not all bad.
That's awesome, man. No, you always have this positive approach, man. Half glass full.
Yeah,
I'm the
why
same
not?
way. I'm the same way, man. That's awesome. Again, Mick, thank you so much. Hope you get to
Thank
enjoy
you.
the rest of your day in the
I
sunshine.
will.
Do
Yeah.
some skating out there. You're right. Awesome, Mick. Well, thank you again, brother. We'll let you know when this all goes out. It's probably going to be about 6 weeks. There's just a lot of
Okay.
production to get
Sounds
this all
good.
edited.
Yeah.
So thank you again, brother.
Yeah. I look
Appreciate it. We'll
forward to
talk
it.
soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.